Hi, because October is kind of like Halloween month, I'm going to be reviewing horror RPGs and supplements. On this occasion, I'm going to be reviewing Realms of Cthulhu. Realms of Cthulhu is kind of like Call of Cthulhu for the Savage Worlds, so there's a lot of similarities between this book and Call of Cthulhu. And well, the quality of the book is pretty good. It's pretty solid, pretty sturdy, and it has a good binding. Although I suspect that maybe in a year or so the pages will start to come off. And the quality of the paper is pretty good too. The book has a lot of amazing illustrations, but there are some illustrations that feel too cartoony for the theme. Well, this illustration is pretty cool in my opinion. Let me see if I can get it into focus. Okay. And this is one of the more cartoony illustrations, in my opinion, that don't quite fit the theme in my perspective. Some of them are a bit surreal. And some others are just very, I don't know, they really bring an impact when you see them. Let me see if I can get that in focus again. There are also some pretty moody illustrations that bring out the theme of subtle horror. Kind of like a haunted library. As you can see, the pages are pretty glossy, so it's pretty hard to get them into the right focus. And well, as a lot of you know, Realms of Cthulhu, specifically Call of Cthulhu, has to do with the works of H.P. Lovecraft, of his weird horror stories. And Realms of Cthulhu lets you use the Savage World system in a way that you can integrate that moodiness of the Cthulhu stories, but in a way that you can regulate the level of grittiness or pulpiness. Well, the book starts with a nice introduction telling you the purpose of the book, how they took the Cthulhu theme and adapted it to the Savage World system. And they give you an introduction and a lot of details on how to create a character tailored specifically for this kind of setting. There's a sanity characteristic that isn't included in the Savage Worlds core book. And here the sanity characteristic is so your character can track how many levels of insanity he or she gets when he faces against the horrors of the mythos, all those monstrous gods and deities. Well, you get a couple of new skills. The knowledge mythos skill, which allows your character to know more about the mythos, so your character isn't taken by surprise when he sees a ghoul or a night gaunt. He may have some knowledge about the nature of that creature, but the more you know about the mythos, the crazier that your character becomes. And that's always a dangerous thing because, as many of you know, in every Lovecraft theme game, sanity plays a major part. You may not die of wounds in combat, but you will probably become insane and your character will be lost. And you also get knowledge, psychology, so you can heal all those levels of insanity that your character will gain as he or she adventures through the horrible scenarios presented in this book. There are also new hindrances such as dark secret. Maybe your character's family has a dark secret or a corrupt bloodline. There's the glass jaw. Maybe your character is kind of pretty weak in a physical fight. There's also obligations and low class hindrances. You also get new edges. Most of them are related to something mental, something related to sanity or facing off against the horrors. So maybe your character is pretty jaded, or maybe he's a flexible thinker. He's resilient, well adjusted. You also get professional edges. Maybe your character is a doctor or a linguist or a psychotherapist. As you can see, all these edges relate to the way a lot of the characters in Lovecraft stories are people that are not exactly the toughest in the bunch, but they have a lot of knowledge and culture, and they apply that knowledge to solve the mysteries of the mythos. And well, you get a nice selection of equipment. I think there's some things in this book, in the equipment list, that are not included in this Realms of Cthulhu book, and you can tell by the how thick they are in comparison that there are a lot of things in the classic called Cthulhu book that don't come in Realms of Cthulhu. So I highly recommend that if you're like a completionist or you want to, I don't know, to have the best Mythos tale ever, if you're that, I don't know, that obsessive, I recommend that you get both books. And well, as I told you, you have a good list of equipment and vehicles with their prices and their costs according to the era, because you can play Call of Cthulhu, Realms of Cthulhu in the 1890s, 1920s, and the modern times. And so, after that list, they tell you all about the setting rules, and this is the best aspect of Realms of Cthulhu. The setting rules allows you to customize the campaign and the adventures to the right level of greediness or pulpiness. That is, maybe your character is actually, it's kind of like an action hero, able to face off in physical confrontations against the monsters of the mythos, and maybe he's also pretty tough in that his sanity, he doesn't become insane as easy as others, and he can witness so many horrors and ambitions without becoming insane. But maybe you want to play a more realistic game where your character can pretty much die in any fight, even against the weakest enemy, and he can become insane just by learning a horrible truth. And so you can adjust your adventures to the level of greediness and pulpiness that you want, or something in between. For example, maybe you want your character to be very physically tough, but very weak of mind, or the other way around. Maybe your character has a very strong mind, but he can easily get killed by a wound, by any normal wound, by a low-level enemy. And so I think that's the best part of this book, the way it allows you to customize your campaigns and adventures. However, there is some things that I think could have been less fiddly or clunky. If you decide to take the gritty approach, you're going to be rolling a lot to see if that particular wound or that the ways some monsters scare your character is going to make your character insane, or maybe gain a permanent injury or insanity. So you're going to be rolling too much, and if the adventurer isn't handled adequately by the keeper or the game master, you're going to be rolling too much all the time. Is going to become very repetitive. So that's something to consider. And well, after that, you get rules to how to recover your sanity and interesting uses for skills. Maybe you want to use your intimidation skill as interrogation. Maybe you're going to interrogate a cultist to find the whereabouts of the cult's hideout. You can also use psychology to read someone, or maybe persuasion as disguise. And then they even give you good advice on how to create your team, as in, oh, you need a character that is pretty skilled gathering clues, and you need this other character that is very powerful when it comes to physical confrontations, and you need some other character that analyzes the clues gathered to reach a conclusion or a final solution. And they give you a good overview of the Cthulhu mythos. You get all the thematic elements in order, what you need to make your tale closer to Lovecraft's style. Although that's pretty hard to do, as you well know, Lovecraft was a master of his craft, so you can only get so close or so far to emulating his style. And they give you a lot of campaign ideas. Maybe you want your characters in the typical Lovecraft setting of I don't know, cultured gentlemen and ladies who are trying to figure out what's behind the veil of reality. Or maybe there are a group of Marines, pretty tough and trained for against everything, every threat and monster, and they are out to destroy the mythos threat for good. But it's curious because there are a lot of a decent amount of adventures in this book, but they don't even come close, in my opinion, don't come close at all to Lovecraft style. They are more suited like for some kind of action hero or comic book. They are just sometimes just too cheesy or too cliche for me to consider them a subtle horror adventure. So that's something to consider as well. And magic in this book is handled in a pretty interesting way. They also give you a lot of elements to customize the way you want magic to be handled in your game. Maybe you want your game to have a lot of dazzling, over the top magical spells, and your character is able to use those spells regularly, like any other fantasy setting or some types of science fiction settings. But you can also handle magic more with a level of subtlety or more discretion. So more discreet, so you don't have to your character throwing kind of like ghostly fireballs at your enemies or using the withering touch against this or that monster, and that's pretty cool. They also get a good an extensive list of cursed books. Obviously, you're going to get the Necronomicon and the Narcotic Scripts and Liberty Bonnies, all those famous books that appear in the Mythos stories. But you get enough information to generate your own books, and of course reading all those books comes with a certain risk to your sanity. The more you know, the more you try fall at risk to become insane and losing your character for good. There's also like a campaign starting point, and I think that's pretty decent as compared to the other adventures. The other adventures are just I don't know, they feel kind of like the Mummy or Indiana Jones, and not exactly Lovecraftian. But the campaign, which is called the campaign starting point, which is called Drake Manor, and it's actually a pretty good starting point for your characters. But I think it needs a bit of tailoring or you putting some pieces together in order, because they present it in a very loose way. But still, it's a very good adventure and well, a campaign starting point. And they even give you a map for the manor where the adventure is going to take place. And if everything goes right, your characters are going to end up with a nice base of operations. However, I do recommend that you download the map from the website, because this one is just too small. And you get a nice list of NPCs and enemies as well, with all those classic Lovecraft monsters, such as the Biaki and the ghouls and the ghasts, the star spawn of Cthulhu, the Chthonians. You get a lot of famous monsters from the stories, and you get rules on how to create your own, because as many of the Call of Cthulhu players know, sometimes it's just too predictable. Oh, that's a ghoul, I know that, or oh yeah, that's a deep one, and everybody knows those monsters, and that's fine because everybody loves those monsters as well. Well, everybody that likes the mythos, but sometimes it's nice to find something completely unknown to your characters. You also get kind of like thematic statistics for the great old ones, but you don't get the statistics. You just the theme, sorry. So you don't get anything like what's their strength or dexterity. Your characters are not supposed to fight them, but that's funny because in the Call of Cthulhu book you do get statistics for Cthulhu and Azathoth and all of them, but here they just treat them like some type of background element. And well, you also get rules on how to convert material from the Call of Cthulhu to Realms of Cthulhu, and that's pretty cool because, as I told you, this book is quite decent in content, but there are many things like alien artifacts and some spells that don't come in this book, and some enemies as well. And as I told you, the statistics of the different great old ones. But with this with Call of Cthulhu, you can convert a lot of this material, so you can have customize your campaign the way you want it. That's pretty funny because of all the systems, of all the RPG systems, Savage Worlds is very suited to have over-the-top battles. So I'm still find it quite strange that it didn't include some statistics for the Great Old Ones in this book, because maybe your characters could fight against them in a giant mecha or something. You can have some pretty cool battles like that. And well, oh, I forgot to mention that you get a good system in this book to generate random adventures and scenarios, and that's pretty decent. It gives you a way to generate mysteries and enemies and plot lines, all sorts of stuff. Well, I think this book is excellent. For those who enjoy Savage Worlds and who like Cthulhu, they should definitely get this book. And I think it shines when you want to play it as a high-packed action adventure kind of adventure or campaign, because there are just so many rules that allow your characters to survive in the pulpy setting. But if you want to play it as a gritty game, you need that level of subtlety or the knowledge to handle things in a way that you're not rolling dice all the time. Because as I told you, the gritty rules have you rolling dice for almost every wound and every scare that you receive, and that becomes a bit repetitive. And if you do decide to get it and you don't own the original Call of Cthulhu RPG, I suggest that you get both books because they complement each other perfectly. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.